CERN just cranked the Large Hadron Collider up to a new record, smashing protons together with higher energy than ever before, and some wonder if these collisions could be bending reality itself. Scientists are hunting for faint energy signals from a shadow universe that could be leaking into ours, and one researcher even claims there's a secret portal deep underground, letting non-human entities in and out. Just back in May, CERN fired up the Large Hadron Collider again, this time hitting a new record with 13.6 trillion electron volts in proton collisions, higher than anything we've seen before. After 3 years of upgrades and maintenance, the collider is finally running at full power again, smashing protons almost constantly to collect massive amounts of data, and scientists are hoping to find new particles or forces that could explain some of the universe's biggest mysteries. The higher energy means collisions are more intense and more frequent, which also opens up the door to weird possibilities. Some wonder if extreme collisions like these could be doing more than creating particles we can detect. Could they be nudging the fabric of reality in ways we don't understand yet? Even if nothing visibly bizarre happens, every time the LHC hits a new energy record, there's a chance that something unexpected could be happening. LHC season is in full swing. If anything unusual were to happen, like tiny glitches in space-time, unexplained energy bursts, or subtle shifts in reality, this is the time. Now, CERN is actually hunting for signs of a completely hidden universe. Using the compact muon solenoid, or CMS detector, scientists have been looking for what they call soft, unclustered energy patterns. In plain English, these are tiny bursts of energy that don't form into normal particles like we usually see. And this sounds nuts, but there's a hypothesis that they could come from a hidden realm, sometimes called the Hidden Valley, a shadow version of our universe filled with particles we can't normally detect. The idea is that some of these hidden particles could briefly appear in collisions and interact with our world through a sort of mediator particle, creating faint signals that our detectors might pick up. These particles could decay into something called dark protons, which could, in theory, turn into ordinary particles like electrons or muons, tiny traces of another universe leaking into ours. Now, nothing like this has been detected yet. The experiments are brand new and super tricky. These energy patterns are faint and they spread out, so they're easy to miss among all the normal particles created in the collider. Still, the fact that CERN is deliberately searching for hidden realms in the first place, that's incredibly cool and a little unsettling. If these hidden valley particles exist, it means the collider could be brushing against a parallel dimension, even if only for a fraction of a second. And for anyone worried about reality itself, that's a pretty chilling thought. And if you think it's just randos on the internet thinking about this stuff, well, listen to this.
But it is more than that, because there are lots of physicians, I know some, they're doing very strange experimentation. There are beings from portals coming in and out. It's physicists from the CERN who told me this.
They've testified to beings coming in and out of portals.
Yes.
That's scientist and researcher Dr. Astrid Stockelberger from the University of Geneva, talking about things she apparently heard directly from scientists at CERN. She claims she got a rare inside look at CERN after dining with some of the lab's own researchers. According to her, they described a strange portal deep underground, like a door, that supposedly lets non-human entities come and go. She says these beings have also left behind objects and mentioned a connection between CERN and military research, hinting that some experiments might be tied to attempts at manipulating or altering time. Now, these are obviously extraordinary claims, right? And just because she's a scientist doesn't mean you should automatically believe whatever she says, but it is interesting to hear a scientist make claims like this. If there's even a grain of truth to her story, it could mean the collider is dealing with something entirely unknown. CERN scientists just built the world's first antimatter qubit. Antimatter is supposed to be the mirror opposite of regular matter, and when the two touch, they completely annihilate each other. That's why it's so hard to study. But at CERN, researchers managed to trap a single antiproton, keep it stable, and actually use it as a quantum bit, the same kind of unit that runs quantum computers. Now, this isn't about building the next laptop though. What they're really testing is one of the biggest mysteries in science: why anything exists at all. After the Big Bang, matter and antimatter should have canceled each other out instantly. If that happened, there'd be no stars, no planets, no people. Now clearly that didn't happen. That's where this experiment gets unsettling. Physics is built on a rule called charge, parity, and time reversal symmetry, or CPT symmetry. It's the idea that matter and antimatter are perfect reflections of each other and follow the same laws. But if this antimatter quibbit starts showing behavior that doesn't line up, then that rule is not absolute. It would mean that the universe doesn't always follow the rules we thought it did. One thing a lot of people don't realize about CERN is just how powerful the magnets in the Large Hadron Collider really are. These are not like fridge magnets or even the ones used in MRI machines. CERN's magnets are over 100,000 times stronger than Earth's own magnetic field. They're powerful enough to bend beams of protons racing at nearly the speed of light and keep them locked in a circular path. Some folks worry that fields this strong could have side effects outside of the collider. There have been reports of compasses acting strange, birds veering off course, sudden drops in migratory patterns happening around the same year as CERN ramped up its power. Nothing officially linked to the experiments, but the timing has led to some questions. And it goes even deeper. CERN admitted their magnetic field has to be carefully contained, because if it leaked out in the wrong way, it could interfere with electronics and other equipment nearby. So there's this idea floating around that this kind of force might be bending more than just particles, that it could be affecting the very fabric of space. This Reddit user had a very eerie experience while heading home. This happened a few years ago, and I still think about it. I was driving home from work on a route that I had taken every day for years. I remember stopping at one red light, checking the clock on my dash and thinking I was running a little late. Next thing I know though, pulling into my driveway. The weird part is the time. According to the clock, about 10 minutes had passed. That doesn't sound like much. My drive was usually under 5. There's nowhere to accidentally zone out and add time. No long roads, wasn't much traffic that day, I wasn't tired. Yet I don't remember anything between the red light and my street. I've tried to write it off as autopilot driving, but can't seem to shake the feeling that the missing time just doesn't add up. And from a now deleted Reddit user, we have a very odd story about a new hallway suddenly showing up in an office building. Redditor wrote the following: I work in a fairly standard office building with cubicles, conference rooms, the usual. Well, one afternoon, I was walking to grab a printout from the supply room. That's when I turned down a hallway I swear I'd never noticed before. The walls, the carpet, the lighting, it all looked part of the building, but everything felt off. I walked the entire hall, saw no one, reached the end, and there was just a locked door that definitely wasn't there before. I turned around and went right back the way I came. I asked a coworker later if they knew about a new hallway or storage area, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Nothing had changed. The rest of the day, I just kept thinking about it. Next, let's talk about something called the chronostasis effect. This is something most people have experienced, even if they didn't know it had a name. You glance at the clock, and for a split second, the second hand looks frozen. It feels like that second lasts longer than it should. And then everything goes back to normal. That effect is called chronostasis, and it's not the clock malfunctioning. It's your brain, sort of. Here's what's actually happening in simple terms. When your eyes quickly move, like when you look from one thing to another, your brain kind of blocks out what you see during that movement. Otherwise, everything would just be all blurry. Instead of letting you notice a tiny gap in time, your brain fills it in. It stretches the first moment you see after the eye movement to cover that missing time. So you look at a clock, your brain makes it feel like the second hand has been sitting there longer than it really has. In a way, you're experiencing this brief little moment that never actually happened. You're not imagining it though, your subconscious brain is just kind of editing reality right in front of you. It's kind of nuts. Speaking of being confused when looking at your clock, this next Reddit user had a very unsettling experience, writing, I woke up for work like normal and checked my phone. It said 7:12. I remember it clearly because I was relieved. I thought I'd overslept, but I still had time. Got up, showered, made coffee, fed the cat, all the usual stuff. I even remember checking the time again while my coffee was brewing, still around 7:20 something. When I got in my car and started it, the dashboard clock said 6:38. At first I thought my car clock was wrong, but it's always been accurate. I checked my phone again, now it said 6:38 too. I didn't suddenly feel like I'd gained gained extra time, it was just earlier again. I guess the clock on my phone was wrong and then corrected itself? Is that even a thing? Can't shake the feeling that I lived part of that morning twice. Quick question. How does Mickey Mouse hold up his pants? A lot of people will confidently say suspenders, at least some of us anyway. You can kind of picture them, especially in that very first cartoon that's etched so many of our brains, Steamboat Willie from 1928. Now, which one of these versions do you think is the real one? If you guessed the one on the left, you're wrong. Those thin straps over his shoulders, they've never existed. At least not in this current reality. In the original cartoons, the official character art, the theme parks, none of it shows Mickey wearing suspenders. He just has shorts with 2 buttons. And tell me if this pops into your head. You know, because I kind of looked at this and I was like, yeah, modern Mickey Mouse, I don't always think of the suspenders, but definitely in that old cartoon. It just looks right. And when I picture that black and white cartoon in my head, I always think of Mickey like pulling his suspenders and snapping them back, and apparently I'm not alone on that, but what do you all think? Next up, we have an odd little phenomenon known as the Kappa effect. It shows how our brains aren't always great at judging time. Scientists have found that the distance between things we can see can change how long we think time lasts, even when the timing is exactly the same. This is known as the Kappa effect, or perceptual time dilation. Basically, when 2 things happen one after the other in different places, our minds don't judge the time between them properly if there's a big gap in space between them. If 2 flashes of light appear and the second one is farther away from the first, people will think more time passed between them, even when it didn't. If the flashes are closer together in space, people think less time passed. Again, even though the timing was the same. This has been shown in controlled lab studies using visual flashes, and versions of it show up in auditory and touch experiments as well. It seems that our sense of time is not separate from our sense of space. Our brains kind of muddy the two, so even something as basic as distance can bend how we experience time. For a long time, we thought time crystals were just a theoretical concept, but scientists have actually managed to create them. But what on earth is a time crystal? Usually, if you leave an object alone and it loses energy, it stops moving. But time crystals are a special kind of matter where the atoms never stop. They keep flipping, moving back and forth on their own forever without any outside energy. Scientists at CERN are playing around with these to see how they react when they're hit with high energy particles from the collider. Just the existence of something that can move endlessly on its own breaks a lot of the so-called rules that we thought were set in stone. There's a lot about the way time and matter work that we're still totally in the dark about. People often focus on the particle beams, but they forget about the magnets. To keep these protons moving in a circle at such high speeds, you need incredible force. Magnets at CERN are some of the most powerful in existence, roughly 100,000 times stronger than the magnetic field of the Earth. Some people are worried that fields this intense could have side effects that reach way outside the tunnels. There have been stories of compasses acting up, birds losing their sense of direction, as we mentioned earlier, and weird shifts in migration patterns that seem to line up with when CERN cranks up the power. CERN has said they had to be extremely careful to contain the magnetic field because if it leaked out, it would fry electronics and mess with equipment for miles, but some wonder if that kind of power is doing more than just bending beams of light, that it might actually be warping the space around it. CERN recently managed to build the world's first antimatter qubit. If you don't know, antimatter is the mirror opposite of the stuff that we're made of. If matter and antimatter touch, they instantly annihilate each other in this massive explosion of energy. That's why it's so hard to study. I mean, how do you hold on to something that explodes the moment it touches anything? Well, researchers at CERN figured out how to trap a single antiproton and keep it stable enough to use as a qubit, which is the basic unit of a quantum computer. But they aren't trying to build a better laptop, they're trying to solve the mystery of why we even exist. I'd call that a slightly loftier goal. According to the Big Bang Theory, there should have been equal amounts of matter and antimatter, meaning everything should have canceled out and the universe should be empty. None of this should be happening. Obviously, that didn't happen. They're using this antimatter qubit to test the rules of the universe. If the antimatter doesn't behave like a perfect reflection of regular matter, it means our understanding of physics is fundamentally wrong. It would mean the universe doesn't always follow the laws we've spent centuries writing down. Back in 2016, this video popped up online that didn't do anything to ease people's concerns over the conspiratorial ideas surrounding CERN. It shows people in black cloaks gathering at night at CERN in Geneva, around the famous Shiva statue, acting out what looks like a human sacrifice. One person unalives a woman, seemingly with what looks like a blade, while the person filming the scene from the window shakes, audibly terrified. It looks pretty convincing, but CERN quickly clarified that the whole thing was staged. The people in the video had access badges, meaning they could be insiders or visiting scientists. Apparently, it was just a prank. And on one hand, that makes sense. Scientists aren't exactly known for having a normal sense of humor. And what better way to troll the internet than by staging a fake ritual in front of the God of Destruction statue? But even after it was labeled a hoax, a few things left a bad taste in people's mouths. For starters, to even get into the courtyard at night, again, you need high-level security clearance, so every person in that video had to scan an ID badge to be there. If it was just a prank, it was an incredibly risky one that involved people with access to the world's most expensive scientific equipment. There's also the question of who was filming. The witness was part of the joke. Why has no one ever come forward to claim credit for the video? People online share some seriously strange experiences, and ever since CERN started doing their experiments, there's been this conspiracy that it's caused some issues with our perceived reality. On Reddit and TikTok, users have posted about suddenly losing track of time, like checking the clock and realizing an hour or more has passed with no memory of it. Could CERN's activities be causing reality glitches, time travel even, opening portals or altering timelines? Now, all this stuff is anecdotal and unverifiable, but they do add to this growing list of weird phenomena people associate with CERN. One Reddit user posted about how since CERN's Large Hadron Collider was turned back on, they've noticed more instances of the Mandela effect, like misremembered logos and song lyrics. Is there hard scientific evidence linking CERN's experiments to this stuff? No, of course not, but the sheer volume of personal accounts is pretty interesting. CERN just kicked off something totally new at the LHC. For the first time ever, protons are smashing into oxygen ions. From late June to early July, the collider switched into a special mode. 2 days of proton-oxygen collisions, 2 days of oxygen to oxygen, and a day of neon collisions. Each type of collision creates completely different particle showers, giving scientists a crazy amount of data to study, everything from cosmic rays to what's called quark-gluon plasma, which is the super hot soup that existed just after the Big Bang. See, right after the Big Bang, the universe was insanely hot and dense, and matter as we know it didn't exist yet. Instead, quarks and gluons, the building blocks of protons and neutrons, floated around freely in a soup before cooling down to form normal atoms. So making these collisions happen is really tricky. Protons and oxygen ions act differently in the accelerator, so if you just let them go, they wouldn't meet, they drift apart. Engineers have to carefully adjust how fast each beam goes and how much momentum it has, so they smash together right in the middle of the LHC's 4 big detectors. CERN is now using AI to help run the Large Hadron Collider, and it's changing everything. The collider smashes protons together millions of times every second, creating a huge flood of data. And obviously, humans can't sort through all of it, so AI decides almost instantly which collisions are worth keeping and which ones to ignore. One of the strangest things scientists are studying is the Higgs boson. You can think of the Higgs like an invisible molasses that sticks to particles and slows them down. That sticking is what gives particles their mass, basically what makes them heavy enough to form atoms, planets, stars, everything we see. Without the Higgs, the universe would just be a soup of energy with no real stuff in it. Normally, we only see one Higgs at a time, but CERN wants to catch 2 at once to see if the rules about how it works are really correct. If it behaves differently than expected, it could mean something about reality itself isn't as stable as we thought. CERN scientists recently discovered something they're calling a ghost inside of one of their oldest particle accelerators, the Super Proton Synchrotron, or SPS. It's a weird energy pattern that makes particles behave strangely as they race around the 4-mile wide ring. To break this down, imagine rolling marbles around a circular track. Normally they follow the path smoothly, but if the track wobbles a little or a marble hits a tiny bump, it can bounce or speed up in weird ways. That's what's happening with these particles. They're supposed to stay on this tight path, but tiny changes in the magnets make them wiggle and shift unpredictably. This effect is called a resonance, and it's like the particles are syncing up with each other in ways no one fully understands. Scientists can map it in 4 dimensions, basically tracking how it changes over time. And they're noticing these patterns can repeat, almost like the machine has its own heartbeat. If these ghosts, so to speak, weren't controlled, particles could scatter, lose energy, or create unexpected bursts of power. Ever since CERN began its collision experiments, people all across Europe have been reporting something unsettling. A low, constant hum. Like some giant machine running underground. It's not coming from traffic, planes, or factories, and seismologists haven't tied it to earthquakes either. These hums often show up right after CERN is running intense experiments. Physicists at CERN haven't officially confirmed any kind of link, but some independent researchers think it could be tied to resonance. In simple terms, that's when, again, one vibration starts matching another and amplifies it. All those massive magnets and particles flying around at crazy speeds, it's possible the collider is making the ground itself vibrate. Some people even wonder if this hum is more than just a sound. Maybe it's a sign that the experiments are doing something weird beyond the lab. Well, whenever conversations like this come up, CERN is almost always mentioned. The Large Hadron Collider, or the LHC, built by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, is a massive circular tunnel buried deep underground on the border of France and Switzerland. Designed for one specific purpose: take tiny particles and smash them together at speeds that are almost at the limit of light itself. The goal is to see what happens in those split seconds of impact, hoping to catch a glimpse of the building blocks of our reality. But when you build a machine that powerful, people start to get nervous. There have been endless theories about what might go wrong. Some are convinced that the LHC could accidentally create a microscopic black hole that would eventually grow and swallow the Earth. Others think we might accidentally rip a hole in the fabric of space-time. There's a very popular idea that CERN isn't just looking for particles, but is actually trying to open a gateway to another dimension. The thought is that by focusing that much energy into a single point, you could create a rift, allowing access to parallel universes. And it goes even further than that. Some people believe that the real hidden purpose of the collider is to make contact with entities, aliens, or even ancient gods from these other realms. And speaking of non-human beings, we have to talk about Dr. Astrid Stockelberger. She is a human being, but she talked about non-human entities. She's a researcher from the University of Geneva, and she's made some interesting claims.
But it is more than that, because there are lots of physicians, I know some, they're doing very strange experimentation. There are beings from portals coming in and out. It's physicists from the CERN who told me this.
She says she once had dinner with some researchers from CERN, and during their conversation, she got a peek behind the curtain that the public never sees. According to her account, these scientists described something strange happening deep in the tunnels. She claims that they spoke about a literal portal, like a doorway that allowed non-human entities to pass back and forth. She also mentioned that these visitors have left objects behind. Beyond the portals, she hinted at a connection between the work at CERN and top-secret military research, meaning that the experiments may not just be about physics, but are actually attempts to manipulate time itself. Now, look, just because someone has a doctor in front of their name, not mean that everything they say is 100% fact. These are pretty out there claims, but it's definitely a strange thing for a respected academic to put her reputation on the line. If there is even a tiny bit of truth to what she's saying, it means that the Large Hadron Collider is doing way more than just smashing atoms. While the theories about portals are hard to prove, some people look at the world around the facility for odd things going on in nature, and supposedly there have been numerous reports from people living in the area around CERN about bizarre animal behavior. There have been stories about birds just falling out of the sky in huge numbers right near the facility. Of course, there's never been an official connection between these deaths and the experiments happening underground, but when you have a machine that's whipping protons around a ring at 99.9% the speed of light, people find it hard to believe that it has zero effect on the environment. Theories that even a tiny bit of electromagnetic interference could be enough to mess with a bird's internal navigation and affect other wildlife in ways that we just don't fully understand yet. Now let's talk about something that is actually a documented official experiment, NA64. The name is pretty boring, stands for North Area Experiment 64, but what they're doing is actually pretty insane. They're hunting for dark matter. We know dark matter exists because we can see its gravity pulling on galaxies, but we can't see or touch dark matter itself. It's like a shadow universe that exists right on top of ours. In the NA64 experiment, scientists fire a beam of electrons at a solid target. When these electrons hit, they usually create a shower of other particles that we can see and measure, but every once in a while, something weird happens. Energy just disappears. Physicists believe that when that energy goes missing, it's because it's been converted into a dark matter particle that just flew right through the walls of the detector and into the unknown. Every time they run this experiment, they're kind of poking a needle into a part of reality that is invisible to us. That's pretty cool. But it gets even stranger. CERN isn't just looking for dark matter, they're looking for an entire hidden valley. This is a hypothesis being tested by the Compact Muon Solenoid or CMS detector. They're looking for something called soft, unclustered energy patterns. But what does that mean? Well, think of it like this. Normally when particles collide, they create a very specific splash that scientists know how to read, but lately they've been looking for tiny, faint bursts of energy that don't look anything like what we've seen before. The theory is that these bursts are coming from a hidden realm, a shadow version of our universe. The idea is that there might be a quote-unquote mediator particle that can bridge the gap between our world and this hidden one. These particles could decay into things like dark photons, which would then turn into regular particles like electrons that our machines can finally see. Basically, they're looking for leaks from another dimension. It's not just a conspiracy theory anymore, when the scientists themselves are building detectors specifically to find traces of a parallel reality. Here's a fun fact. Clocks in different places really do measure time differently, and I'm not talking about clocks being busted. In the early 70s, physicists Joseph Haffel and Richard Keating took atomic clocks aboard commercial airplanes flying around the world. They compared those airborne clocks to identical clocks left on the ground. After the flights, they checked all the clocks. The ones on the planes didn't match the ones on the ground. The clocks that flew eastward lost time compared to the ground clocks, and the ones that flew westward gained time. This happened for a very clear reason according to Einstein's relativity. A clock that moves fast relative to you ticks more slowly. A clock deeper in a gravity field ticks more slowly than one higher up. Both effects showed up in the flying clocks. The ones moving fast and closer to the Earth age differently than the stationary ones. Engineers even have to correct for these effects in the GPS satellites that tell your phone where you are, because if they didn't, GPS would drift off by kilometers every day. So time itself doesn't flow at the same rate everywhere. It's almost a direct, measured anomaly in time. This next story comes from a now deleted Reddit user who described a possible glitch in reality while walking through their neighborhood. It goes as follows. So this happened to me yesterday, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and I usually take the same route when I go for my evening walk. Yesterday, I left around 7 p.m. Headphones in, same path as always. About halfway down the street, I noticed something weird. The same kid on a bike passed me, going the same direction I think I passed him earlier in the day. Okay, not too strange, maybe a coincidence. Then I saw my neighbor's car parked in the driveway, but it had a completely different license plate than it usually does. Then I walked past another house I passed literally every day, and the front porch decorations were exactly the same as a week ago. Not changed at all. I'm positive, though, I saw them swap out the decorations a few days ago. By the next morning, everything was back to normal. My neighbor's car was the right one again. The decorations had changed. But I can't shake the feeling that I somehow walked through a glitch in reality. When spacecraft swing past Earth, they use the planet's gravity to pick up speed and slingshot toward their next destination. Scientists calculate these flybys extremely carefully. Every curve, every boost, every tiny push of gravity is predicted to incredible precision, but in some cases, spacecraft come out of these flybys with a tiny bit more speed than expected. It's just a few millimeters per second, but it's enough that it can't be ignored. Multiple missions, including Galileo, NEAR, and Rosetta, show the same thing. The numbers just didn't match their calculations. Nobody fully understands why it happens. Some theories involve weird interactions with Earth's rotation, the planet's shape, or even something in the spacecraft itself. But so far, no explanation fits all the cases. Some scientists call it a kind of time anomaly because, in a way, the spacecraft's movement over time doesn't line up with what our physics predicts. Black holes are already strange. They warp space, bend light, and crush matter. They also mess with our understanding of time itself. Back in the 70s, Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes slowly lose energy by emitting what we now call Hawking radiation. That means they can shrink and eventually disappear, but according to the math, any information that falls into a black hole could be lost forever, and that breaks a core rule of physics. Information can't just disappear. Everything that happens in the universe leaves a trace. If black holes destroy that trace, what's going on? Physicists call this the information paradox, and it's still unresolved. We don't know exactly how time and information behave inside or around black holes. This doesn't mean time travel is happening, but it does mean that in some of the most extreme places in the universe, some of our most fundamental theories about time, cause and effect, and the flow of events doesn't fully line up.
In 2016, a video surfaced online showing what looked like a mock human sacrifice in the courtyard of CERN, right in front of the statue of Shiva, the Destroyer. A gift from India symbolizing creation and destruction, the footage sparked immediate panic. People around the world believed CERN was not just doing science, but performing occult rituals tied to its experiments. CERN quickly responded, saying the video was a prank staged by individuals with unauthorized access, but still, the symbolism of a sacrifice in front of a statue of Shiva, combined with CERN's mission of smashing particles to recreate conditions from the Big Bang, sent conspiracy theories into overdrive. Even though CERN dismissed it, the association of occult practices with high-energy experiments left many people disturbed and made some physicists uncomfortable with the public's perception of their work. CERN is not only smashing particles to discover new ones, some experiments are actively searching for signs of extra dimensions beyond the ones we live in. One proposal suggested that collisions at the LHC could briefly open micro wormholes or gateways to higher dimensions. The idea terrified the public and fascinated scientists. If true, it could explain mysteries like dark matter, but critics worried about what could come through those openings, or what might leak out. In 2008, CERN even published a safety report directly addressing public fears about extra dimensions, black holes, and vacuum decay. While the official word was that the LHC was safe, the very need for such a report shows how uneasy people, including some experts, felt about the implications of these experiments. Speaking of vacuum decay, perhaps the most terrifying possibility ever connected to CERN is that exact idea. In physics, our universe exists in what is called a false vacuum, a very delicate state that could, in theory, collapse to a more stable one. If that collapse started, it would spread at the speed of light, destroying everything in its path. Some theorists worried that high-energy collisions at CERN could trigger this process. Although later studies concluded it was nearly impossible, the fact remains that LHC reaches energy levels never before achieved by humans. When you are running experiments that could theoretically erase the universe, even the smallest chance is enough to terrify scientists. When CERN announced the hunt for the Higgs boson, nicknamed the God particle, the media frenzy made it sound apocalyptic. Headlines claimed CERN might destroy the universe by creating something unnatural. Some even linked the Higgs boson to doomsday prophecies. In July 2012, CERN confirmed the discovery of the Higgs boson, and the world did not end. But behind the celebration was real unease. Peter Higgs himself had warned that high-energy physics could unleash unexpected consequences. The Higgs field gives mass to particles, so tampering with it sounds like tampering with the very foundation of existence. Even though the discovery was safe, The panic it triggered shows how quickly CERN's experiments can cross from groundbreaking to absolutely terrifying. CERN is not just dangerous because of what it discovers, but also because of the scale of its operation. The Large Hadron Collider consumes around 1.3 terawatt hours of electricity per year, about the same as a small city. In 2015, CERN had to shut down experiments because Switzerland simply did not have enough power during the winter. The sheer energy being fed into the collider raised fears of unintended side effects. Could the massive electromagnetic fields generated by the collider interact with Earth's natural systems? Some conspiracy theorists even claimed that strange weather and earthquakes were linked to CERN powering up. While scientists dismissed these claims, the fact that one machine can drink as much electricity as a city makes it feel like an experiment far too powerful for humans to control. One of the strangest incidents linked to CERN happened in 2009 when the collider suddenly failed. Engineers discovered the cause. A piece of bread had fallen into outdoor machinery, possibly dropped by a bird. The malfunction was serious enough to shut down operations temporarily, but what made the story eerie was the timing. Some theorists speculated that it was not just an accident, but a kind of sabotage from the future. They argued that nature, or even time itself, was trying to prevent CERN from making dangerous discoveries like the Higgs boson. While most physicists laughed it off, others admitted the coincidence was kind of unsettling. The idea that the universe might be actively fighting against CERN's experiments sounds absurd, but it is exactly the kind of story that keeps the public, and even some experts, uneasy about what goes on underground.
Everyone thinks CERN is just this massive science lab where physicists smash particles together trying to figure out how the universe works. That's part of it, but some things about it have made people a little uneasy. There's been talk, nothing officially confirmed, but talk that some of the technology developed at CERN, especially the particle beams, could have military uses. Particle beams, in theory, could carry huge amounts of energy over long distances. People start wondering if some of the knowledge or data from the collider could be useful for defense research. Even if CERN is strictly doing science, it's hard to ignore the overlap between what they're creating and what could be weaponized. The collider is a 4-mile ring that can recreate conditions that haven't existed since the first fractions of a second after the Big Bang. That kind of energy is insane, so it's not hard to imagine that particle beams could do way more than just smash protons together. People living around CERN have sometimes noticed weird things with animals, especially birds. Over the years, there have been reports of flocks suddenly dropping dead or animals acting strangely near the collider. Nothing official has ever connected this directly to CERN's experiments, but the timing and location does make some people wonder. It's easy to shrug it off as coincidences or natural events, but when it keeps happening around the same giant machines smashing protons at nearly the speed of light, I don't know. Some swear they've seen birds suddenly fall from the sky, animals acting all erratic near open fields close to the facility. Scientists would point out the particle beams are safely contained and there's no evidence of radiation leaks, but they're also dealing with pretty cutting-edge experimental stuff here. You can't anticipate everything. Even a subtle magnetic or electromagnetic influence could, in theory, disrupt the wildlife in ways that we just can't fully comprehend yet. And it's not just the animals. People near CERN sometimes talk about a certain strangeness in the air during active runs. Now, could that be paranoia? Yes. Could there also be something genuinely odd happening? Maybe. NA64 is an experiment at CERN. The name stands for North Area Experiment 64, and its goal is to find dark matter, the invisible stuff that makes up most of the universe but doesn't interact with light, so we can't see it. Here's how it works in simple terms. Scientists fire a beam of electrons at a target. Normally, when particles hit a target, they make other particles we can detect, like little sparks from a collision, but sometimes energy seems to just vanish completely. Physicists think that missing energy could mean a dark matter particle was made and flew off without interacting with anything we can detect. Every time the electron beam vanishes like this, it's basically poking at a part of reality that we can't normally see. Now, they're not finding anything yet, but each run teaches them a bit more about what dark matter could be and where it hides. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it, though. The experiment is probing a potential realm that's invisible to us. People near CERN have been reporting weird dreams ever since the collider started running at full power. I'm talking alternate reality type stuff here, and it's always right after big collider runs. The timing is really what freaks people out. Someone will have one of these dreams, check the LHC schedule, and realize it happened the same day protons were smashing at record energy. A bunch of these reports started popping up online. People comparing notes, trying to figure out if CERN is somehow affecting their dreams. Now, this could be total BS, or maybe the collider is briefly warping reality. Let's talk about time crystals. Yes, time crystals. That sounds like a MacGuffin in a Marvel movie, but time crystals are actually a thing. They're basically a really strange type of matter. See, normally if you leave something alone, it stops moving eventually. Atoms in a time crystal never stop. They keep flipping or moving back and forth on their own forever. Scientists at CERN are experimenting with these so-called time crystals to see how they interact with particles in their collider. Now, they're not creating a portal to another dimension or anything like that, at least not intentionally, but the fact that something can move endlessly on its own is kind of nuts. When you combine that with the enormous energy of the Large Hadron Collider smashing particles at near light speed, well, it's easy to imagine that some unintended crazy things can happen. Time crystals are harmless by themselves, but they do show us that there are a lot of things in the universe we just can't even begin to understand. At CERN, scientists smash particles together at insane speeds. Most of the time, what comes out is messy and random, but a few years ago, they noticed something strange. Two particles created in the same collision were acting like they were still connected to each other, even after they flew apart. These particles are called top quarks. They only exist for a tiny fraction of a second before they break down into other particles. They disappear so fast, you'd expect them to act completely independently once they're gone, but when researchers looked closely, they saw patterns that didn't line up with that idea. What they found was that certain properties of one particle were linked to the other one, meaning when one behaved a certain way, the other matched it. That kind of connection only happens if the particles are entangled, but these particles were not sitting next to each other. They were created in violent collisions that immediately moved apart. There was no time for signals to pass between them in any normal way, yet somehow the connection was still there. This was entanglement happening at the highest energies humans have ever reached. It seems that at a very basic level, the universe doesn't always behave the way we'd expect it to. Now, anyone remember Wii Sports? I used to play it all the time. I got pretty far in my virtual boxing career in this game. I could still hear that announcer exclaiming those two beautiful words, "You win!" Only that never happened. I mean, me winning happened. I won so much, I'll tell you, but there's no announcer that actually says, "You win." User Rampo7 posted on the Mandela Effect Reddit, writing, "I was building some contraption and decided that I wanted to use a sound effect of the Wii Sports announcer saying 'you win.' I can hear him saying it in my mind's eye. I asked other people I know, and they all agree that the announcer says 'you win.' He, of course, does not. Did anyone else think that he did?" And I pose that same question to all of you. Yes, you specifically. In 2012, something strange showed up in real particle experiments studying B mesons, which are short-lived particles created in huge numbers at particle colliders. Researchers at the Babar experiment in California looked at billions of these particles and how they changed over time. What they found was that certain transitions happened more often in one direction than they did in the reverse. So in other words, the forward behavior didn't match the backward behavior. One report described the findings like this. Scientists, quote, found that certain particle types change into one another much more often in one way than they do in the other, a violation of time reversal symmetry. So what does that actually mean? Well, when these B mesons behaved one way, there wasn't the same chance of seeing them behave the opposite way. If time truly worked exactly the same forward and backward, these rates should match, but they didn't. scientists saw an imbalance. That doesn't mean particles are traveling back in time or whatever. What it does mean, though, is that at a very tiny level, the universe seems to prefer one direction over the other. In normal life, we still only experience time moving forward, but deep down, the rules may not be as black and white as we thought. Picture the Starbucks logo. Probably pretty easy for most of us. I mean, in a lot of places, Starbucks is inescapable. Tell me which of these logos you think is accurate, though. It's the one with the star. But people are pretty divided by this. There are a lot of people who have absolutely no memory of that star. Granted, a star makes sense. I mean, the place is called Starbucks, but I mean, there's no king's crown in the Burger King logo. This image was posted to Reddit, and one commenter said they work at Starbucks and have never even noticed the star. So, what do you all think? Share your thoughts down below. In 2014 and 15, a team of physicists in Australia published work about something called closed time-like curves. A closed time-like curve is just a fancy way of talking about a path through space and time that loops back to itself, like a particle going out and then somehow coming back to meet its earlier self. In real life, we have no idea if this is actually possible, but scientists found a clever way to imitate what that might look like in a controlled experiment. In the study, researchers built a lab experiment that didn't literally send anything into the past, but it did mimic what would happen if a particle could interact with its own past self. They used a tiny particle called a qubit, and they used another qubit to act like the, for lack of a better term, past version of the first one. By carefully controlling how these two qubits interacted, they created a situation where the first qubit's state would affect the second qubit, and the second qubit would affect the first, just like a loop through time. What they were testing is the idea that if time could loop, particles could behave in ways that normal physics would not allow. In the experiment, the qubits ended up in states that are impossible if time only moves forward. For example, they could solve problems that normally quantum particles couldn't solve, like distinguishing between states that are normally indistinguishable.
Imagine running an experiment that could, in theory, swallow the planet. That is exactly the fear that erupted when CERN scientists announced that the Large Hadron Collider might produce miniature black holes. The idea was not science fiction. Some theoretical models suggested that smashing protons together at high enough energy could create tiny black holes that immediately evaporate. Physicists reassured the public that these holes would vanish instantly, but what if just one did not? In 2008, lawsuits were actually filed in European courts to stop CERN from turning on the collider, arguing that the risk, no matter how small, was unacceptable. Although the courts dismissed the cases, the idea that Earth's most advanced lab could create black holes terrified the public and made even experts uneasy. One of the scariest theories connected to CERN involves strange matter, sometimes called strangelets. This is a hypothetical type of matter so stable that if it ever touched regular matter, it could convert everything around it into strange matter too. Think of it like a cosmic infection that could spread across the planet. In the 1990s, similar fears surrounded the relativistic Heavy Ion Collider in the US, but the Large Hadron Collider at CERN revived the debate. Some theorists warned that colliding heavy ions could create strangelets capable of devouring Earth from the inside out. While no strangelets have ever been found, the possibility still lingers in theoretical physics. Even if the chances are astronomically small, the concept of a runaway particle that eats the planet was enough to terrify both the public and some of the scientists involved. Few substances are scarier than antimatter. At CERN, researchers at the Antiproton Decelerator Facility have been producing and trapping atoms of antihydrogen, the antimatter version of regular hydrogen. Antimatter is fascinating, but it is also very volatile. When matter and antimatter meet, they annihilate in a burst of pure energy. Just 1 gram of antimatter could produce an explosion equivalent to a nuclear bomb. The amounts at CERN are microscopic, far too small to cause harm, but still the fact that scientists are deliberately making and storing one of the most dangerous substances in the universe raises some eyebrows. In 2012, CERN trapped anti-hydrogen atoms for 1,000 seconds, a record at the time, pushing closer to being able to study it in detail. But even the tiniest containment failure could spell disaster. That reality makes antimatter one of the most forbidden feeling experiments happening at CERN. In 2011, CERN made an announcement that shook the entire world of physics. Neutrinos, ghostly particles that pass through matter almost undetected, appear to be traveling faster than light. If true, this would have broken Einstein's theory of relativity and forced a rewrite of modern physics. For months, scientists double-checked their data, terrified of what this meant. If particles could outrun light, causality itself, the principle that cause comes before effect, would break down. It would mean that time travel, paradoxes, and physics as we know it were all collapsing. Eventually, CERN discovered the anomaly was caused by a loose fiber optic cable, but for those few months, the world of science stared into the abyss of rewriting everything we thought we knew about reality, and even the physicists admitted that that was kinda terrifying.
Scientists at CERN were looking for answers about the universe, but some believe they may have cracked open something much bigger, much scarier. Today we're going to look at 10 disturbing signs that CERN may have actually ripped through reality. In 2010, a disturbing rumor started to spread that CERN might accidentally create a strangelet, a hypothetical particle that could turn all matter it touched into more strange matter. If that happened, it could consume the entire planet in seconds. Now, mainstream physicists dismissed the idea as unlikely. Leaked safety reports revealed that CERN scientists had actually debated the risk, though. That alone was enough to frighten the public, and then years later, satellites recorded massive, unexplained bursts of radiation in Earth's upper atmosphere, the kind of anomaly some theorists connect to strange matter interactions. Now, no official link was ever made to CERN, but the coincidence fueled suspicion that the collider may have been brushing up against forces powerful enough to destabilize reality itself. For people already uneasy about the collider, the strangelet panic was a sign we might be playing with fire. In 2016, CERN admitted they were running experiments to detect micro-black holes. Scientists reassured the public that these would be harmless and would evaporate instantly, but even the possibility was enough to unsettle some people. Micro-black holes are not like anything we can fully predict with current physics, and in theory, they could pierce the fabric of space-time itself. At almost the exact same time, people began reporting unusual phenomena. Sinkholes opening up without warning, mysterious booms heard across different countries, and strange lights in the sky. None of these events were officially connected to CERN, obviously, but the overlap in timing was suspicious. If micro-black holes were being created, even briefly, it is possible they didn't disappear quietly. Instead, they may have left tiny scars in reality that we're still living with today. When CERN announced the discovery of the Higgs boson in 2012, newspapers around the world called it God's particle. But behind the excitement, some scientists quietly raised some alarms. Theoretical physicists warned that if the Higgs field was unstable, it could trigger a vacuum collapse, an unstoppable chain reaction that would spread at the speed of light and erase reality as we know it. Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek went on record suggesting the discovery could pose a real danger to the universe. Strangely, that same year, reports of Mandela effect cases surged. Entire groups of people started insisting that logos, movie quotes, geography, that it all changed. Could this be coincidence, or did the discovery of the Higgs particle alter our universe so fundamentally we actually shifted into a safer version of reality without realizing it? In 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared without a trace, becoming one of the greatest aviation mysteries in history. Well, official investigations eventually concluded that it probably just crashed into the Indian Ocean. No large wreckage was found for years, and what made the event more unsettling was the timing, though. The disappearance happened during a period when CERN was running some of its most aggressive collision experiments. Small but vocal group of people suggested that if CERN had destabilized space-time, objects could literally fall out of our dimension. Sounds nuts, but the complete vanishing of a massive passenger jet without debris or signals, that is kind of suspicious. Could it be that the plane didn't simply crash, but slipped into a different reality altogether? Of course, there's no official evidence, but the timing has got people raising some questions. Something unusual happened in 2016. Around the world, people started reporting reality glitches at a much higher rate than ever before. Famous movie lines no longer matched what people remembered. Historical dates were slightly off, and even geography seemed to change in subtle but noticeable ways. I remember me personally, I learned about the Mandela effect in 2016. CERN's collider reached record-breaking energy levels that year though, smashing protons together at 13 tera-electronvolts, which is the highest energy ever achieved in human history. Some researchers speculated that at such extreme energy levels, CERN might have briefly accessed parallel universes or altered the quantum structure of our own. For ordinary people, 2016 felt like the year the world suddenly tilted in some strange ways, as if we had merged maybe with another timeline. CERN really was opening tiny doors into parallel universes. This may have been the moment when two of them fused into one. CERN has a lot of odd little details around the campus that have caught people's attention, mainly to do with the number 666. Some of the older equipment and walkways have markings that, if you squint, do line up with the number, kind of. And there was also a thing about a year back about 666 being hidden in the CERN logo. And people really take patterns like this seriously because, for one, this is the internet, and people have a lot of time on their hands, and two, CERN is a place where engineers and physicists are obsessed with precision. So, to be fair to this conspiracy, repeated symbols don't usually happen by accident. There's nothing proving any kind of ritual or secret meaning, but when you do consider all the other strange things, like the mysterious hums under Geneva that we talked about, I believe in part 2, or reports of weird glitches in reality, and just the nature of the experiments themselves, well, it's easy to see why some people find the symbolism kind of creepy. It's the kind of weird reality glitch story that people will talk about when conspiracies surrounding CERN are brought up. Plus, this happened in 2009, about a year after CERN started doing their current tests. So back in 2009, a guy named James Richards says he had one of the weirdest experiments of his life in California. He was out driving near Del Porto Canyon with his dog when the dog bolted after a rabbit. James chased after it, tripped, hit his head, and blacked out. When he came to, he wasn't where he fell. He was in a room, and it looked kind of normal at first, but there were also machines he didn't recognize. A man then introduced himself as Jonas and told James that he worked for a, quote, dimensional travel agency. According to Jonas, while James was unconscious, he'd been transported to a parallel version of Earth. This other Earth, it looked a lot like ours, but with some major differences. For one, in Jonas's world, the Beatles were still alive and making music. James was skeptical, obviously, until Jonas handed him a cassette tape labeled Everyday Chemistry. On it were Beatles songs that don't exist here. James brought the tape back when he returned to our world and later posted the whole thing on his website, which you can listen to. People living near CERN sometimes say that during big collider experiments, the night sky can get a little weird. Stars they always see suddenly vanish for a few seconds. One minute everything looks normal, the next chunks of the sky are just gone. Astronomers haven't reported anything unusual, and satellites aren't showing missing stars either, but for the people who notice this, the timing is kinda sus. Some wonder if all that raw energy underground could somehow bend light and mess with the atmosphere just enough to make stars disappear. Even if it's just your eyes or brain playing tricks, a lot of people describe the same thing happening at the same time. Pretty weird. Speaking of weird stories like this, that brings us to this story from Reddit user Electronic Employee 3049, who posted this story about a month back, writing, "I saw something last night and I've been questioning our existence since. My neighbor saw it with me too, so I know it was real. We were watching a satellite go across the sky, right by the third star down the handle on the Big Dipper. The satellite went on by when the unexplainable happened a second later. It was like the sky glitched out for a few seconds, as if someone smeared the sky with their hand in a particular area. Like it was pixelated, or had some strange pattern over it, kind of in a striped, flowing square shape. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then my neighbor said, 'Dude, did you see that?' I couldn't believe she saw it too. And then every hair on my body stood straight up. I was speechless. and still am. Are we in a created world? Is this a simulation? What did I just experience? I can't wrap my head around what I saw last night. And finally, there have been rumors from scientists working at CERN that some unusual collision data just vanishes. Certain particle readings, things that don't make sense with known physics, are reportedly removed or corrected before anyone else sees them. People who've worked near the detectors say it's not always a technical error. Some patterns disappear too cleanly, too perfectly. These claims are never officially confirmed, and the researchers talking about it prefer to stay anonymous, which is always a little suspect. But it does make you wonder if CERN is covering up things that could be bigger than anyone realizes. In June of 2016, residents living near CERN's facility in Geneva began circulating photographs of a bizarre swirling vortex that appeared in the sky directly above the collider. The images showed this dark circular cloud formation that looked eerily like a portal opening in the atmosphere. Around the same time, the region was hit by unusually intense lightning storms, adding to the eeriness of it all. Meteorologists insisted it was a weather phenomenon, but for a lot of people, the coincidence was just too weird. CERN was running its most powerful experiments ever, and suddenly, this perfect vortex appeared above it. Even now, the photographs are online, and there's theories that CERN may have accidentally torn open a hole in space-time, if only for a brief moment. For those already wary of the collider, it didn't really ease their feelings about it. Standing outside CERN's headquarters is a bronze statue of the Hindu god Shiva, known as the Cosmic Destroyer. The statue itself is real and was gifted to CERN by the Indian government in 2004. But in 2016, something strange happened. There was a leaked video that showed people in lab coats performing what appeared to be a ritual sacrifice in front of the statue. CERN dismissed the footage as a prank staged by employees, but some people were pretty disturbed by the imagery. Shiva's role in Hindu mythology is destroy one cycle of existence so that another can begin. Kind of a fitting symbol for a facility smashing the building blocks of reality apart. Staged or not, the video really didn't do much to help ease people's suspicions, all the conspiracies and stuff. I don't know. Are they meddling with things bigger than they're letting on? Who knows? In 2017, scientists noticed strange anomalies in the Global Positioning System. GPS satellites, which rely on incredibly precise timing, began showing discrepancies that could not be explained by ordinary errors. These glitches appeared soon after CERN ran another round of high-energy experiments. The problem with GPS is that even the slightest distortion in space-time can throw its timing off. Since the system depends on relativity, some quietly speculated that if CERN warped space-time, even for a fraction of a second, the effects could ripple outward and impact satellite networks. Officially, the errors were attributed to software bugs, but skeptics believe this was one of the clearest real-world signs that CERN's activities were bleeding into our everyday reality. For something as critical as GPS, even a small, unexplained glitch can be deeply disturbing. In late 2015, just before CERN announced new high-energy collisions, astrophysicists detected bursts of high-energy particles hitting Earth that could not be explained by solar activity or cosmic rays. These bursts appeared suddenly, spiking detectors across multiple observatories. What made this so unsettling was, again, the timing lined up almost perfectly with CERN ramping up the collider to nearly double the energy it was before. Official reports avoided making a connection, of course, but researchers admitted they'd never seen anything quite like this. Some theorists suggested that if CERN's experiments had briefly punctured space-time, energy could have leaked out as a kind of particle storm hitting Earth from nowhere. The anomaly eventually faded, but for many, it remains one of the most disturbing signs that CERN's work may not be fully contained. Finally, imagine waking up one day and realizing your memories don't match reality. That is exactly what millions of people began experiencing around 2010, shortly after CERN's collider started running at full power. The Mandela effect, a phenomenon where entire groups of people remember history differently. It suddenly exploded in popularity around this time. Some swore Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 80s, only to discover he lived until 2013. Others said childhood staples like the Berenstain Bears is now Bernstein Bears, and CERN's high-energy experiments started in 2008. Within 2 years, all these collective memory glitches, they seem to be getting talked about a lot more. Skeptics say it's just people's faulty memory. But the number of people experiencing the same misremembered details, it makes some people wonder if we slipped into an alternate timeline. If CERN's experiments really did shift us into a new version of reality, the Mandela effect might be the first widespread clue. Next up, I have another Mandela effect for you. The Scooby-Doo gang. They're iconic, right? Especially Shaggy and Scoop. And you close your eyes and you can picture them instantly. Scooby with that goofy smile and blue collar. Shaggy with his classic green shirt, Adam's apple sticking out, and that patchy goatee. Except one of those things with Shaggy is not actually accurate. Which do you think it is? It's the Adam's apple. He doesn't have it. But don't we all picture it? He's tall and gangly and he has a big Adam's apple. It just fits. So what is this weird reality we now find ourselves in where that little detail is missing? According to Redditor DateRichWillow_up22, they may have briefly entered into an alternate timeline. I was in our office kitchen grabbing coffee when my manager asked me to attend a quick meeting in the conference room. I walked in, a few coworkers were already there. We started talking about a project, went over a few documents, and I remember the discussion clearly. When I went back to my desk, I mentioned the meeting to another colleague, only to get a confused look. "What meeting?" they said. I asked the manager later. He said no one scheduled anything. The room hadn't been booked. I'm 100% sure the conversation happened though. I even remember specific comments from coworkers, but when I checked my email and calendar, there was no record, no reminder, nothing. It's like the meeting existed for me, but not for everyone else. Have you ever heard of the Oz factor? There's a strange experience people have reported for decades. The world suddenly feels like it stops. All the typical sounds you normally hear, like birds, traffic, and all the movement, it just pauses. It often lasts only a few seconds, maybe half a minute at most. But while it's happening, there's this uncanny feeling of time being off. Some even describe feeling like they've stepped into a totally different reality. The term Oz factor was coined by British researcher Jenny Randalls in the late 80s. She noticed this same description popping up again and again in reports from people who claim strange encounters or unexplained experiences. Different countries, different ages of the people, same feeling though. Silence, awkward, eerie stillness. What's interesting though is that this doesn't only happen during dramatic events. Some people report it while walking home or sitting in their car, and then just as suddenly everything comes back. The sound rushes in, birds start chirping, cars pass by again. Psychologists have acknowledged that people genuinely experience this, but there's no agreed upon explanation. Bold Street in Liverpool is usually just a busy shopping street. Cafes and clothing stores, bookshops, but over the years it's also become known for something a lot stranger. People claim they briefly stepped into the past while walking down it. One of the most talked about stories comes from a retired police officer named Frank. In 1996, he was walking along Bold Street to meet his wife for coffee when something felt off. The shops around him didn't look right. Modern storefronts were gone, replaced with older ones. The people around him were dressed like it was the 1950s. Even the cars parked along the street looked decades old now. Trying to make sense of it, Frank walked into a shop called Cripps to buy something for his wife. The moment he stepped inside, everything snapped back. The shop was modern again. The street outside looked normal. All the old cars and vintage clothes were gone. Bold Street as he always knew it. And there's another story from 2006. A couple was shopping on Bold Street when the woman decided to step into a bookshop. As soon as she entered, she felt this chill. Inside the shop, it looked completely different. The books, the shelves, everything felt like it belonged to the early 1900s. She rushed back outside and found herself back in the present, with her husband confused about why she looked so shaken up. There are plenty of stories like this tied to Bold Street. For whatever reason, this street has earned a reputation as a place where time doesn't always seem to behave the way it should.